the service.
Nothing loaded?
They were doing some invasive
About
removal
half
for
of
us in
them.
the
The
watershed,
others-
and
No explanation, no.
Marius Young State Park has made extensive use of
Kind of the bottom
volunteers
ones
to do
there.
stuff. It's
All the bigger
impressive.
swans, site photos,
But, yeah, it's a
habitat
big park
survey.
that's tracked.
Do you have it on there?
Yeah.
you know what's funny
I
is
can
you have
take
to
them
watch
to
at 43
put 'em on
because
the
more
screen.
than once I've had deer pop out during the evening commute down 43 and run right across there into the park.
Yeah,
And you're just not expecting something that big that on that busy road that time of night.
yeah, but when they want to go, they go.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they lose one once in a while. Okay, now,
Do we have a quorum?
we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Jerry's in the audience because he wants to testify.
Sure.
So 4 is a quorum, I believe.
5, 7, yeah.
Looks like we can start
Okay.
any time.
Are you recusing yourself?
Oh, I have some testimony.
Okay,
You can't do that.
Okay. The mayor does roll.
okay,
Hold on.
okay. Do you want to discuss that real quick? The mayor does it all the time. What's,
The mayor does not step down.
I've watched them do it in relation to the project, so I'm just going to ask some questions about it. Whatever you want to do.
I don't believe we have a quorum.
Well, you cannot deliberate toward a decision without a quorum. You can't make a decision without a quorum. Public comment on by a private citizen, I think, I'm not sure. I think you can do that. But if it is,
oh, Kathy, you've sat in
He
on
wants to
many
testify.
meetings. What is your awareness of that subject?
What?
Jerry's wanting to sit down and give public testimony rather than sitting up here, at least at the start. Is that legit?
Well, I don't see why he can't do both.
He was stating that the mayor does that. Have you observed that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, he is present.
yeah, so you do have a quorum.
Yeah, because he is here. So, do we have to do a roll call first and then he goes out there, perhaps?
yeah, I think that's probably best for the record.
Okay. Yeah, come up here.
I don't understand why you can't make your testimony as a committee member.
It's not an item on the agenda. It's not on the agenda.
Yeah, go ahead and.
Before we get too worried, I don't think you'll find it terribly unconstructed. All right,
Okay.
call roll.
All right. Call to order, and we do have a quorum. Why don't we just call out our names and
Jerry Herman here.
Bob Roth, present.
Brian Boyce, chair.
Marla Smith, secretary.
Pete Walter, associate planner and staff liaison.
Okay. Okay.
John Lewis, Oregon City Public Works.
Tony Conkle, Community Development Director.
Okay. So we do have an order. Call to order. We do have a quorum, and I'd like to go ahead with public comment on items not on the agenda.
Are you calling me?
Yes, I am.
All right. Just for the record, my name is Jerry Herman. I live in Gladstone at 19045 River Road. Okay, the reason I'm here in this capacity, frankly, is because I watched in the past things happen where people needed to give into some kind of testimony that was on their heart, and I watched people on the commission do it in the past, related to Clackamas Cove and some other things. And, I just found out today from a citizen, a rental, about the removal of 770 trees. I know Tony knows about this, on Thayer Road. I just want to let you know I was not a member of the Natural Resource Committee 3 years ago when that came up for consideration, I believe in 2010. Is that true? 2 years ago. 2 years and several months ago. And but a lot of citizens were concerned. The Natural Resource Committee no longer existed. We basically had failed to continue together, not working together, but understanding what our mission was in the city. I passed to each of you a memo from Bob Nelson, who was a member of the committee. He founded the tree subcommittee. We've been talking about a tree subcommittee working in the city. You might have seen this before, you might not have. The date of this was about 2009. I guess my microphone's going dead. Is that true?
We can hear you.
Yeah, it's
Okay, I can't hear myself anymore. All right. With a letter of concern, more or less, to the committee, and he did this after he met with the Mayor Alice Norris, and his opinion at that time was the Natural Resource Committee was not being considered in terms of relevancy in certain city commission decisions. Now, hopefully that's changed. But I want to tell you that myself and probably 20 other people gave input regarding a project on Thayer Road where 770 trees were to be removed. And I was shocked at that magnitude of material being removed, even though it was a former timber production area. It was kind of set up for that purpose. It was now in the city's domain. It seemed to me that it should come under some considerations where less trees would be removed. And the Planning Commission denied this project. Tell me if I'm wrong, Tony. The City Commission denied this project. I got a call from the mayor the next day after the denial, Alice Norris, saying, Jerry, I hope you were happy about this denial. I said, I'm not happy about anything. I was hoping that the developer would work with the city to come to a compromise where at least more trees than none would be left on site. You have a memo in front of you from Walter H. Knapp and Associates, which is a consulting arboriculture and also forestry person, talking about the condition of the trees. Some of them have disease problems. You also have content here, I believe, from Tony, as far as I know, findings about the application. And I don't know when this was done, Tony. Maybe you could tell me. Was it in the last 6 months?
I'll respond when you're done, Jerry.
All right, he'll respond when I'm done talking. But the fundamental issue here is 770 trees are being removed, less 2. I should say 770 are being removed and 2 retained. Maybe there's 772 trees there. And I know the intent was to try to create larger diameter trees. In some cases, that's what the memo says. Several hundred trees would be required. 300, it sounds like, from what I was seeing here. And now we're down to about 148 would have to mitigate the loss of the forest of 770 trees. Now, I just want to state again, the community had a concern about this. The Planning Commission had concerns about this. They denied the application. They sent it on to the Planning Commission. Excuse me. The applicant went on to the City Commission for reconsideration. The City Commission denied it too. And I don't know what's going on here, but I'll be honest with you, this is the second largest removal of trees in this city's history. The only thing that's greater is 800 and some trees that took place on Glen Oak Road.
Okay.
So I understand the issues about density, and I think a lot of this is being driven by Metro and other issues, but this city is now applying for Tree City USA status. I think if we're serious about this, we have to think about the consequences of removing this much material.
Okay.
The big question to me, based on Bob Nelson's memo of 3 years ago, is how could we, or should we have been consulted? This committee's been around now for about 6 months, is my understanding, 7 months. So it seems like if the decision was made earlier, fine, than our existence, but it seems like we should have received this information. I got this information because it was sent to members of the City Commission. I would like to hope that this group of people that are donating our time would also have a chance to look at this issue too.
Okay.
Last but not least, I guess the only other thing I want to say is that I feel that one thing we could do is look at what other communities are doing. I'll be real quick. Wesleyan has a fine Parks and Rec director. He's won national and state honors. I'd like to see this committee ask Ken Wooster to come in. He's dealt with these kind of problems, the same kind of thing, and work with the community to seek a compromise that people would be happy with, because he oversees the tree ordinance in his community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And if the chair wishes, I can provide a brief summary of what we could provide as far as information on that development.
Okay.
The Thayer Road subdivision, which Jerry is referring to, which was denied as an expired land use application.
Hold on. There's a long history on this property.
There is.
The applicant came in and realized that there were significant trees on the property. He came in with a proposal to, he requested some variances to lot sizes and whatnot. The issue was that once you start cutting into these trees, and these are second and third planted trees, this site had been logged. It was under timber tax deferral. It was specifically planted for harvesting, and then it was not maintained. And you entered into a situation where you had extremely thin trees that were extremely tall. And once you started cutting into those, the blowdown chance increased dramatically.
Yeah, okay.
So the applicant came in and requested some variances to lot sizes and housing type to try and create clustered housing so that they could come back in and replant it significantly to create another healthy community.
Attached housing.
The neighbors came out, were against that. It was denied at the planning commission level. They appealed it to the city commission. The city commission also denied that. So the applicant then went back and went through the subdivision process, which when you apply for a variance to certain standards, you need to go in front of our planning commission to get approval for that. So that's what they did the first time around. Second time around, they just said, we will follow your code to the letter, exactly what it says, which they are entitled to do, and that is a staff level decision. So that decision was issued in September of 2010 in terms of the land use. So what they did is they submitted their application for the subdivision. Our code at that time identified if a tree is of a certain diameter, if it's in a certain location, it had a mitigation schedule. And there was some discretion in terms of you had multiple tax lots. Almost all the tax lots and almost all the trees were in timber deferral and were planted specifically to be harvested. So we worked out a mitigation schedule with them on the planting of that. At that point, I don't believe that the Natural Resources Committee was in place in September of 2010. So since then, it's going through your engineering plans. So they're getting ready to move forward now, which they are.
I want to point out this is an R2 zoned subdivision.
Right.
So 2,000 square foot lots.
2,000?
That's the minimum lot size.
It's 3.5.
Oh, sorry,
It's
R3,
3,500.
yeah,
So
R3,
they were actually entitled to under the R3.5 zone, which is a 3,500 square foot lot. You can have two housing types. One is a single family detached, or you could have single family attached. So you could have two houses connected but on separate lots. So in their original application, that's what they had proposed. They proposed some clustered housing, some smaller lot sizes to try and create areas where they could significantly replant. Those were denied. So they came back in with just your run-of-the-mill subdivision. And so, and that's where we're at. So they're, in our understanding is that they are preparing to begin that process, that construction process, which does include the cutting down of the existing trees on the property.
And subsequently, they'll be mitigating with approximately 270 odd 2-inch caliper trees, and some of their street trees would be larger than our minimum, which is a 2-inch caliper. So based on their mitigation plan and what was submitted by Walt Knapp and Associates, who was he's a board certified master arborist who looked at the stand conditions and gave a very detailed report on what would happen in the event of urban development of that kind of stand. And that was all submitted to the City Commission for review as well.
So what was the bowl size range in that woods?
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking Douglas fir, some as large as 30, but I think the typical was about 12 to 16 inches. Diameter breast height. Don't quote me on that, but we can provide the report later. Should you wish to see it.
Pete, I've got a question. It was mentioned that the trees, they're partially harvested, they're subject to additional blowdown. What in the design factor when the trees are mitigated for I'm assuming that the density and the size of the trees are going to be less than are currently there. How does the design take into account that potential for blowdown, given that you're talking about fewer number of trees in a less dense environment? It seems like the individual trees would be more exposed to the elements than less.
I can answer that real quick. When a block of trees grows, the outer ones are more exposed to wind. They're more resistant to wind. The ones inside are protected by the ones around them. You cut away the outer edge, the inner ones have a higher tendency to blow over.
No, that's not my question. My
Okay.
question is for the trees that are going to be replanted
Right.
for mitigation. It seems that their density and their quantities are such that they'd be vulnerable to damage.
That's why we went with
That's why, yeah,
a
go ahead.
lower number in appropriate locations and appropriate type of tree. But and that's where Pete was discussing. Usually when you plant a street tree, let's say the minimum caliper is 2 inches. We were gonna give them credit for planting larger trees sooner, so they could come in with 4-inch trees or 6-inch trees or 8-inch trees, and we would do it based on a total inches planted rather than a total number of trees because of the site constraints associated with these smaller lots that we do see.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and trees that are planted in the open grow a stronger root system and are less likely to blow down, even though they're more exposed. That'd be the other angle.
Mr. Chairman, my concern here isn't so much over, it's enough over the removal of this magnitude of forest, but I can't quite understand if we're this duly appointed body of people, why we couldn't have been emailed this same information. It seems to me that this work is now underway. And it just seems to me Bob Nelson's memo of 3 years ago is very relevant. Are we relevant or not? The city commissioner are not the only people that are acting in this regard, and we're specifically tasked with the duties of trying to respond to this kind of thing. I'm not blaming Tony either.
Well, there's nothing to blame. We are asked to inform our city commission of things that are upcoming, and we do that on a regular basis. And I had let them know probably about a year ago. We thought they were going to move forward with this project. They ran into some issues with financing and whatnot, and so once they've been working with our engineering department. So I sent an update to my city manager, who forwarded it to the city commission to just give them an update of where we're at in this process. There is no negotiation. The land use decision was done in September of 2010. There is no negotiation on the conditions of approval or the trees that are going to be removed to that site through any type of a city process. If you're just wanting a general notification,
I think it'd be better than being surprised by some business people. I mean, I was up there doing business for another purpose, and they're asking me why a whole forest is coming down. I said, I don't know. But then when I heard about the forest, I know a lot of details about this, as you do. So, I think we should be informed of this kind of thing. I'm not sure what can be done. You already provided the conditions, sounds like 2 years ago, but the total number of inches that you refer to, 2,652 inches of new trees to be provided. There is 770 trees at least 10 inches and bigger in diameter out there, at least that. So I know you have these constraints, but again, it comes back to the spirit of what we're doing. If we're a Tree City, USA city, we're applying for that status, let's do everything we can to make sure that this kind of impact is minimized. And I have to say, I believe Metro has a lot to do with this, with the density requirements that they've been advocating, which a lot of people are objecting to, not just over density, over impact in certain areas. So I just wish somehow in the future we would be notified of this and have a chance to give comment. But for 2 trees to be retained, I don't know what 2 trees are. Are they numbered? Are they something special? 2 trees out of 770, or are they a special tree? Okay. Are they in a special place where they could be saved? Okay. All right.
I just want to be clear. You have no right to comment on this at this point.
I see that.
So I guess I just want to be clear that, I can understand, the concern, and I think that, calling either myself or Pete, and we can certainly answer those questions when they come up. We'd be happy to do that.
So say that the owner, developer of the property did come into the office. He did tell staff on several occasions what the timing was of his forestry permit, which is issued through the Oregon Department of Forestry. Their notification requirements are different from the city's. And he stated that he was going to post a sign on the property with his phone number on it so that if anybody had a question about the logging operation, they would call him. And no one has called me about this. Because it's a land use decision that has been passed, that's gone by, and the Oregon Department of Forestry is really handling the logging operation now.
And they're also handling our application for Tree City USA, are they not?
Well, their Community Forestry
Forest
Department,
Department.
which is a separate application.
All right.
It is submitted to the Arbor Day Foundation, and that is mostly dependent on what the public tree ordinances are for the city.
And I must tell you, I
Yeah.
spent time with this developer. I know him. Spent time with him trying to talk to him about ways I felt that he could minimize the impacts. And the arborist that he used in the past doesn't seem to be mentioned in here, which got my concerns too. So, again, in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, that's a huge amount of biomass being removed in the city right now.
Well, I guess let's be clear that he tried to come in and do something initially,
Right.
and it was denied.
Right.
And so, the options were extremely limited at that point on what the options were to do with the property. If there's not going to be community support and city support to try and do something unique and innovative, then you go back to what your code says. You go back
Right.
to what the city commission and the communities adopted as the minimum standard, and they met those. So I understand your concern,
Right.
but I also think Mr. Marnella tried, and he spent a considerable amount of money and time up front getting denied and trying to do something different. And it wasn't accepted. So
Is the breakdown then in part where we didn't advocate for a community vignetting process to look at, how to help him make adjustments? I'm trying to figure out what, you just made a statement that says, I believe that said, if we could have helped him make adjustments the community would have liked, then it might be more appreciated now. Is that what I heard you say? Something like that?
no, I think what I'm trying to say is that he tried to make an attempt
Okay.
to do something a little bit unique and different, and needed variances from the standard in order to do it. And there just wasn't support to do that.
Because
So
the
he was-
variance that was requested on the initial application, I believe, was to lot width. for an attached housing.
I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, it was. But be that as it may,
Right.
it's within the urban growth boundary, and, Metro does have density requirements for
Yes.
cities within the boundary in order to preserve farm and forest land outside the boundary. And that is the fundamental tension here.
Right,
So,
that is the tension, I agree.
You can have a lot of discussions about that, but we had an R2 code and R2 subdivision, R3.5, but, yeah.
Well, just to conclude this, for the record, I would like to request that we receive information like the planning commission, the city commission, on any of these things that have this magnitude, even if they're after the fact, just to keep us abreast of them. Is that something we need a motion on, Mr. Chairman? If so, I make that motion.
Is anyone going to second that?
Can I get clarification?
Sure.
I think what I'm trying to understand is exactly what kind of project, what is it that we're asking? What's the standard,
What's the standard?
what the type of project, the size, something?
Here's the communication from
No.
the city
What I'm trying
commissioner.
to say is, if we're asking for increased notification or advanced notification in the future, it will probably help staff if we provide some kind of direction on.
I mean, if we're talking about another 700 trees coming down, I can tell you right now we haven't approved any of those, so
Good.
you're not going to be
Good.
receiving any of that. So, but if we're talking, there has to be some threshold there of what's significant to you.
I think we're trying to clarify maybe the size of the project or the type of impact or something.
That would be very helpful.
That's all I'm trying to ask for, is that we're clear on what kind of thing we're asking staff to know.
Well, your bylaws currently state that you are to be apprised of and able to comment on any land use application that has the potential to significantly affect a natural resource.
Yeah, so,
And we take that to mean that during the review period for an application, we would bring that forward to you, and we would explain what the approval criteria are and whether or not the application has met those approval criteria. That could include anything within a natural resource overlay district, anything subject to significant tree removal, which is also subject to our tree protection standards in the development code, and wetland and various other types of things. But yeah, the fact is that this application has already been approved, and it just happened to have been approved at the time that the NRC was not in effect.
Okay. So,
I believe, Mr. Chairman, we had a motion. I'm willing to withdraw it if the consensus is that we would receive information in the future.
yeah,
Time.
yeah, my understanding has been that we would, in significant cases that impact natural resources, we would be given information. Of course, that's not highly defined exactly how you decide that, but it's, I believe, up to staff to make that.
That's correct.
Okay, we have a question from the audience here. Did you fill out a form? Go ahead and do that. And so are you going to?
I'm happy. I just want to, remind the committee to take a look at this memo from Bob Nelson, because I think it's still something that we should use as a guiding light. He was the one that founded the tree subcommittee that worked on the Tree City USA stuff initially.
Yeah.
And, I certainly don't want to go through any more protracted problems than anybody else does. I want to work in concert with the staff. And I certainly want to work in concert with the developers if there's a way to do it, to encourage them to do something a little more creative.
And I guess just for clarity, 2.56.050 of the municipal code, which is what the Natural Resource Committee is under, is that the committee shall receive and may review and comment on all land use applications that significantly impact natural resources and related projects and policies coming before the City Commission and Planning Commission. The Natural Resource Committee comments, if any, shall be included in the staff report. So just wanted to, that you got to remember that there's staff level decisions that are done by my staff. Then there are Planning Commission decisions, and then there are City Commission decisions, depending on the type of application that it is. Decisions that we make at the staff level is where we would, for example, in the subdivision code, it says that if a tree is 8 inches in diameter, at 6 inches, and it's within a building footprint, this is how many trees have to be replaced. Okay, it's a yes or no, it's a black or white. We make those type of decisions. We get into the Planning Commission is where there's some discretion involved. And if there's a case where there's a application going to the Planning Commission that has an impact on a natural resource, that's where it would come to you. So I just want so for example, this application that we're talking about right now, this subdivision, was a staff level decision. Per this code, it would not have come to you because there are prescribed requirements and prescribed approval criteria that have to be met. So let's just say, it came before us today, and there were 500 trees that were to be removed, and they were going to mitigate per the standard. Even if we didn't agree with it and we didn't, wanted to propose something else, unless the developer agreed to that, they're only bound by meeting what we've adopted as a mitigation schedule. We can't come back after the fact and say we want more or we want something different. If we want that, we need to change our code to reflect that. So just some nuances of how much discretion we have as a decision-making body when it comes to land use decisions.
So taking a look at the standards that we have now might be a more viable approach.
And
Might be.
we did change, there were significant changes to the code in response to both of these applications. In terms of, because before, what our code said was, if you're going to cut down trees and it's, let's say it's in where a new road's going to go, in the right of way, or if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, let's say it's R10, and you put the setbacks on there, so you've got a 20-foot backyard setback and you've got a 20-foot front yard setback and 10 on each side, you have what is in the middle, what we call the building area. So if you were taking out trees that were in the building area or were in the right-of-way, you didn't have to mitigate those. You didn't have to replace them. So those are some of the changes that we made. Was, even if it's in a building footprint area, you have to mitigate it. It's a lesser standard. It's less trees being put back because you got to put the road in and you got to put the house somewhere. But then what it did was it said, okay, if you're in a setback where you can't build anything and you want to take that tree out, then the mitigation is higher because you have the ability to plan around that and save it. So there were quite a few changes made in response.
Yeah, it would be good at some point to get a more thorough education
of the
on what those
history.
standards are.
Sure.
But we need to move on at this point.
Thank
We
you.
have
Thank you.
Dave Prideaux who wants to speak on this subject. Our standard time period is 3 minutes, so getting to the point is the best. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Dave Prideaux, Oregon City. My main point has to do with integrity. I think that this is a public forum. We live in a democracy. This is Oregon City. This body that's here is representative of this kind of issue. And the city is undermining its own integrity by, I'll limit my remarks to two actions that you're doing here. Number one, and Jerry's already spoken to both of these. Number one, you have some hypocrisy running here to be trying to call yourself a tree city and get recognition and designation and so on to be operating this way. That undermines your integrity in doing that. And the second thing Jerry spoke very clearly to, which is a public process. You certainly have your bureaucratic rules, you have your procedures, you have to follow code, I understand all that. But you also are responsible to the public. The public elects the commissioners oversee the staff and provide policy direction to staff. And to leave this committee in the dark and to operate, there's absolutely no reason, like Jerry said, that you couldn't have at least, at the very minimum, involved this committee, let these people know, and not have this come as a surprise. Even if there's absolutely nothing that anybody could do, say, or whatever, you live in a democracy. You live in a place where people need to hear. And if you want to just completely shut out the public, this is educational, if nothing else, from your point of view. That shows contempt, not only for these folks that are sitting here. And lastly, I'll just let you know, several people here know this, but I used to sit on this committee, and we were treated that way. Irrelevant. Keep them in the dark. You're going to do what you want to do. As far as you folks are concerned, what's the point of even letting you know anything? And I think the public, if the public found out, would be not too happy about that type of process that the staff engages in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we have one other comment from Gordon Wilson.
Hello, my name is Gordon Wilson. I live at 107 Jefferson Street. I just had a few comments about the Oregon White Oak application. Just to begin with, I noticed that you were going to talk about the Public Works tree survey and stuff, and I just wanted to talk about a little bit of history on that. In the very beginning, with the Oregon City Public Works Master Plan in 2009, they described the area as all they said was it had poison oak, ivy, and invasive species. They made it sound kind of like a brown field of some sort, and the neighborhood was like, what? That doesn't sound correct. We walk through there every day. It's not just poison oak and whatever. So we kept talking to them like, hey, there's these giant trees there and stuff. And they're like, whatever. But then they get it passed, and then they come up with this, okay, we will do a habitat assessment for you, because maybe it is more than poison oak. And then they come and give us this tree assessment. and it's all based upon its value if there was a truck and gravel and fuel yard there. It's like, these trees are nice, but with a truck and gravel and fuel yard, it's not very valuable. It's not worth anything, really. And so it's upsetting that, the neighborhood wanted it to be looked at as a natural space. What is it value how it is now, not how it would be with a truck and gravel yard around it, which is what I feel like the tree survey they did comes up with, and I don't know why they even paid money for that, because anyone could tell you that, it's probably not worth anything with a truck and gravel and fuel yard around it, as a habitat. But what the neighborhood thought was that it did contain Category 5 resources of many sorts and stuff. And, that's what we were trying to emphasize and stuff. But, it's kind of like they just wanted to put it in its best light for a development, not like for, what we felt like is Category 5 resource. And another thing with the tree survey, it seemed like one of the big issues was the trees have ivy on them. Well, we can take the ivy off of them in like 2 weekends or so. So I don't think that's a reason to think the trees are all ruined or anything. So anyways, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. So,
I drafted these minutes for the last
they're in
meeting.
the packet, aren't they?
So if you have any corrections to them,
Does anybody have any comments?
Mr. Chairman.
those should show up on your screen as well, because it's a small file. We didn't have any problem loading that one.
Let's see if that one comes up. There we go. Yeah, it does show up.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the minutes are well done. I do have a correction to make on page 3 of 126. A lot of stuff you sent us. Saying Mr. Carr noted that his commitment to the ecosystem services workshop would be a problem due to his current obligations on tree subcommittee and also transportation system plan. I responded to him in that when he made that comment, saying, if you can't do it, do you have a problem with somebody else's saltwater conservation service doing that? I'm putting together a series of workshops, of which we'll talk about later. One of them was on ecosystem services. He's a part of the group that does that, right below the planning department. They have this incredible facility there, federal and state officers, and they do all sorts of planning and such related to the environment. So what I said to him was I would seek someone else, and I just wanted that reflected in the minutes there.
Okay.
And I have done that. I'll
Yeah.
report that later.
Okay, yeah, we can add that in.
Everything else, you're incredible. You got better eyes than I do.
about that.
I can tell that.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make that correction.
Okay, any other corrections, additions, omissions, deletions? Okay,
Mr. Chair, I move for adoption.
I'll second.
okay. Anyone in opposition? Okay, then that carries. Okay, now we're on to the Waterboard Park issue and the Heritage Grove nomination discussion. So we
Just
have some-
note that not all of the attachments loaded onto your touch screens, so I'm going to go over to the laptop and load the bigger items, and then as we discuss each item, we can pull those up for your review. You'll need to flip your toggles over to the presentation mode when we do that, though.
Yeah,
Me referring to the hard copy is just fine. Is that right?
Yeah.
That you did for me?
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
yeah, some of the first ones.
So we...
Are you going to just go ahead and do all of them, or?
Yeah, I will briefly summarize the attachments that we've got before you before we go into.
Okay.
We've prepared a big report. We've got the staff memorandum, which is a 6-page report, and that starts on page 6 of 126.
Yep.
And goes to page 12 of 126. We've got attachment 1, which is the nomination that was submitted to the city. It consists of the nomination form and a tax map. Attachment 2 is a memorandum from Nancy Kroschauer to the Planning Department and her request that the nomination not take effect until the Public Works Department has found another site or moved off the site. And she also has requested in there that the nomination be more specific. Attachment 3, tax lots and aerial photos. This is a useful attachment because it talks about which tax lots are included in the nomination, which tax lots are Public Works facility, and which tax lots comprise Waterboard Park itself. Attachment 4 is the largest document, which is why your packet is so thick. It's the Public Works Center Master Plan, Habitat Assessment, and Tree Evaluation from June 2010, which was prepared as a result of the conditions of approval attached to the Public Works Center Master Plan. Attachment 5 is a tree survey that was done to accompany that assessment. Attachment 6 is an enlargement of the tree survey with some tree counts that have been done by staff in order to determine how many species were done in the tree survey that actually met nomination criteria. Attachment 7 is a consideration email that I prepared as just ideas off the top of our head when we should be considering these nominations. Attachment 8 is a very large document that won't show up on your touch screens. It's site photos that were taken recently. We can look at those on the aerial on the projector. Attachment 9 is the relevant code for approval of a nomination. Attachment 10 is the charter section. The city code city charter designates Waterboard Park as a natural area, and chapter 10 of that charter talks about the boundaries of Waterboard Park, and that should show up on your touchscreen. Attachment 11 is the definitions for a heritage tree and a heritage grove. And Attachment 12 is a copy of the commission report that gave an update to the City Commission with respect to where this nomination was at in the process. So that's your packet. And then what Tony and I are going to do is go through our staff report and explain that. One second. I'm going to bring up attachment 3 on the aerial as well.
So I guess I'll just start with the first kind of page and 3/4 is just the history, clarifying that you really have two sites here. You have Waterboard Park, which you see on the dais in green there with multiple tax lots, and then you have the Public Works facility, which is identified in gray as a single tax lot. We tried to break this down into two separate discussions since they operate set differently, and they're two different, one's under Parks and the other's under the Public Works facility. And then we just went through and just summarized the code approval criteria and what the standards are, the size of a tree by type of tree that would qualify as a heritage tree. And then we started the discussion, and we started with Waterboard Park, the explanation that this is an identified natural park in our charter, and that provides additional protections of the area. It's been identified as a natural area. The city cannot go in, lease it out, construct significant buildings without a vote of the people. So having that charter protection as a natural area has occurred. We also we have some just very brief descriptions of the property. Hopefully you've had a chance to visit it, and describing what it's used for in terms of the natural area, dealing with the ivy that's in there is an ongoing issue. in terms of an actual survey of the site, we do not have that. We don't have a very good descriptions of what species, types of trees are in there, what type of habitat is in there, what those conditions are. The city hasn't done an inventory of it, and one was not provided. So we walked through and tried to provide some narrative for you for your discussion and consideration as they relate to the approval criteria. And when you look at the heritage tree or grove nomination process, you have an A, B, and C. So you need to meet one of those, or two or three. And then you have D, which talks about the tree is not irreparably damaged, diseased, hazardous, or unsafe, or the applicant is willing to have the tree treated by an arborist, and the treatment will alleviate the damage, disease, or hazard. So you need to meet either A, B, and C, one of those, and D.
I noticed that's the applicant. That would be the person requesting the heritage nomination.
Correct. And this is a little, you're either going to have it on public property, which is the case here, where it's owned by the city, or in which what happens is I take the application and we gather as much information as we can, and we take it to the city commission and we make a recommendation. The first is if they would like to proceed with an application on the property, and then the second is there a designation and what that designation is. The other ones that you've seen are ones on private property where the private properties come in, designated a tree. So in this case, it's a little different. You've seen private property ones. The other two that you've seen, this one's on public property. So the process is a little bit different in that the applicant isn't necessarily providing all the information. In this case, the city's not providing all the information. We're not putting together the application. This was brought forward from the public, which is outlined in how we do that in this code section. Another thing to consider, and we included some information in there. We have these diameters by tree species that would meet the size requirement for a heritage tree. And then it says if there are trees within 20 feet of another, if there's two of those, we could call that a grove, a heritage grove. And so I think that's just a point of discussion maybe that the committee would like to have of what they consider a grove. Is it similar trees? Is it same trees? Is it any trees of size that meets the minimum standard as long as they're within 20 feet? If it's a fir to a white oak, does that count as a grove? So we just need a little bit of, we didn't clarify it in the code. And the request here is to nominate all of Waterboard Park as a grove. So any insight you can give us on that or what your opinions would be very helpful.
One question about, this is on city property, and people are pretty aware of kind of the impacts that English ivy has upon trees long term. Can you describe kind of what the city's level of commitment is as far as managing or reducing the English ivy presence? And I'm thinking not just weekend cut or something like that, but long term, because it seems like either you have almost invasive takeover, which you can see in other places nearby, or you have to have a sustained commitment to reduce the ivy impact, or you won't have any potential for a healthy grove.
Right. And unfortunately, and right now I'm just going to focus on Waterboard Park, and we'll go to the Public Works facility afterwards if that's all right with you. That's under our Parks Department, and with our current staffing levels, we don't have a program. We don't have an urban forestry program to deal with invasives right now. We don't have the funding, and we don't have the staffing to do that. So that continues to be a challenge.
Can you comment on David Fraser's thoughts about having an urban forestry program? Because he's talked to me several times about that. I think it's one of his long-term goals, somehow. Not that we can solve that now, but God willing, and the river doesn't rise too high, it's his dream.
Yep, I think when we're doing the Tree City USA designation, that's one of the, and it's a discussion that we've had as we've implemented these higher standards for street tree replacement or hazardous tree removal, we don't have an urban forester. So we are starting to see an increased impact on staff and our ability to respond to these proactively, and we tend to be more reactionary. I agree. I think it's a long-term goal. Where that is in the spectrum of funding, I don't have an answer for you there. And just to wrap up real quick before we get into, we just provided a couple of discussion topics that we thought might help you as you guys formulate your discussion and a recommendation if you can come to one. They're not. It's not the list. It was just things that we were thinking of that we were struggling with as staff, as to how do we want to address this in this application that we see before us today.
And I want to tell you, this helped me a lot, because it helped me really analyze the ordinance, which is kind of clear. This helped even more, your perspective in looking at the ordinance. And then A, B, and C at a minimum are things that, help me. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want me to bring up the site photos, be happy to do
Go
that.
ahead.
Yeah.
Just a brief comment on groves and what that might mean. It have a lot to do with canopy, contiguous canopy. If they're isolated trees, they're not a grove. But they could certainly be mixed species, because that's the natural way things are here. And in horticultural plantings, that also happens usually, most of the time. So I certainly wouldn't limit it to one type of tree in a grove.
And Mr. Chairman, I looked at the analysis of the trees that were in, really congested, highly isolated areas, and it talked about dead trees within there. The arborist looked at them, and you're going to find dead trees within a very highly competitive area. Mm-hmm. And A, B, and C, and D don't talk about dead trees. But I have a fondness for standing dead material and down woody material, as you know. I think our committee has probably a role to play in that. But I would hope that if a grove effect, we look at it more clearly, it's going to include some dead and down woody material, standing and otherwise.
Yeah, primarily for the benefit of wildlife.
Right.
Yeah, okay. As long as it's not dangerous, is what they're going to
Right,
say.
there you go.
And I think another thing that we struggle with a little bit is how does the presence of invasives and ivy impact a designation without a plan to address? I mean, do you designate it first because it's there, even though it's potentially in what would be considered a degraded habitat because of invasives, or are we only now? What is the purpose of the heritage designation? I guess is what
I think the purpose of it is to basically honor trees that have an impact on the human spirit, or something to that effect. That might not be the perfect phrasing, but so if the tree's there, the tree is there and eligible, even if there is the surrounding terrain includes invasives, and those invasives, the designation of it might encourage the removal of those invasives either by volunteer or other means. I was going to mention the Mary S. Young Park has one of the largest volunteer group in the area, and they've done an impressive job removing huge amounts of ivy over the years. So it can be done, but it's they have the advantage of being a state park that's run locally, and they've got a big volunteer base. But you can still do that in smaller parks. So that's maybe the way this city will have to go.
Is that designated as a tree grove?
No, not yet. That's part of the proposal, is to. I mean, the grove there at Mary's Young. Not that I know of. I don't even know what the regulations are in that city.
Do you know, Jerry?
That's why I was suggesting we have Ken Wooster come. I mean, we've got some great people in this city, but Ken is phenomenal in dealing with the community there. I asked him in front of the former mayor of this city, how do you deal with the public and the demands of your commission? How do you balance this? And he said, well, this is really interesting. He said, first of all, the commission, they come and they go. My commitment has to be the citizens over time, because they'll support me. in my endeavors. I thought that's a really interesting statement. No matter whether there's a change in elected officials, he's reaching out to his community. That's why he has hundreds of volunteers down there and then working throughout the city. And it's pretty amazing what they do. But I think we could do that here too. We've had good cleanups in the past with 150 people.
We
And
could do that without the designation as a tree growth.
probably, certainly.
Okay.
Motivation is what it's called if you want volunteers, and guidance. It doesn't require a designation of anything.
Food helps.
Food helps. There you go. Thank you.
Another aspect of the staff report and the designation process is that the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee needs to be informed about the nomination at some point. So that has not occurred yet, and they have not given a formal review yet. But we would want to do that.
Okay.
So I guess the other things we outlined. Do you have sufficient information to make a recommendation based on the application that you have? One of the are you okay making a recommendation not knowing what's in there in terms of tree type and to what extent? I think the park's about 22 acres or so.
19.3 maybe,
19.3
and then you've got
acres.
Public Works, which is
I'm actually familiar with the park myself. I think Jerry has been there some. I don't know about the rest of the members.
The members were all invited on March 21st. Many were busy. On May 19th, the same workshop that Brian and I were doing will be repeated for the public. And we had a good turnout, and it wasn't about trees so much as just the attributes of the area, including the flora of the area.
Yeah, the only thing about it is not knowing the condition of all these trees.
Right.
Because I go hiking up in there and running and things like that, and you can't really tell the health of these trees because of the invasive ivy. So, I mean, if we did designate it or send it forward, with this, is it going to fall? I mean, if it was to go through with this nomination, does the city then have to go in and remove all of the trees that are designated irreparable, or have an arborist come in? Like, where does that financial obligation fall at that point? That would be one concern I'd like to take into consideration.
I know what the code says, and it doesn't really address ongoing maintenance of the health of the tree, except in situations where it's going to be hazardous. There is sort of an ongoing obligation to maintain the grove in a natural state, which implies that there's not a lot of maintenance involved. So I think the nomination itself does not readily solve the immediate issue or the issue of ongoing ivy removal and those other things. Although it certainly it focuses the public eye on the grove and potentially makes people aware that it has been given a different status above and beyond what it already has as a charter park. So there's that. However, funding, volunteer coordination, whether there are other invasive species that are also important to consider, those are all aspects of a plan that has not yet been put forward.
That's one of the things we struggle with a little bit too, is because in the conversations I had with Mr. Archer from the Community Services Department and Parks, we just, as I explained earlier, we just don't have the staff or the resources to go in there and actively manage it or even start the ivy pull at this time. Now, if resources are dedicated to that through the budgeting process or other means, that could certainly change. But that's going to and so while I appreciate the question, because we have the exact same one, is how are we going to address the requirement that the tree is not irreparably damaged, disease, hazardous, or unsafe, or the applicant is willing to have the tree treated by an arborist, and the treatment will alleviate the damage, disease, or hazard. So, what are we obligating ourselves to something, or are we going to make a finding that, you know, we're just going to nominate it and worry about that requirement under D later, and that's something that, you know, is a policy decision of the city commission. In making that determination, you know, your input we certainly want, and we will certainly pass that along in terms of, you know, if we can't make a financial investment in it, does that impact your decision? Or even if we can't, you know, this is how you still feel about it, or it should be part of it. I mean, it's a conversation. That's what we're asking for is your input on to help us, form this policy, because we haven't had to deal with this before.
I think I have a question in a sense. I think about kind of leadership and the resource development. If it's, you know, bottom up from, I'm thinking like we don't have an urban forester, we don't have the resources to, you know, pull the ID, you know, official city capacity. Is that something, you know, at what level long term for the leadership to try to enhance that capacity? Who's to take a lead role on that? Is that top down or bottom up or out in?
All of the above. You know, I mean, if there's community support for it, you know, I mean, there's lots of ways to affect change in terms of. But what it comes down to is a budgeting issue.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to ask is, would the city be willing to work with and attempt to enhance the efforts of volunteers that might organize and come to the aid of this particular park, with or without the heritage designation?
Once again, I don't want to speak for Mr. Archer, but in the conversations we had, we struggle with the staffing we have to maintain the parks that we have. You know, Portland is a great example. They have a great volunteer system. They have a volunteer coordinator that's what they do.
Right.
They coordinate people. So, you know, staff in parks, you know, they reach out where they can, and it's on a limited basis. Like I said, I don't want to speak for Scott, but I don't think that there's a capacity there to really take it on, you know, where it's weekly, where they're setting that up, where they're doing the outreach, where they're trying to get the numbers. But, you know, that's a conversation. Maybe that's part of a longer term implementation plan, or it becomes part of, you know, it becomes a budgeting priority or a staffing priority that we move towards. But at this time, it's not in the program to do.
Tony, wouldn't you also say that the issue isn't whether it's tree growth or not, it's an issue of money, right? So I don't see the city taking a different position on this, on the desire to prepare or deal with or coordinate or help volunteers, whether it's a grove or not. It's not. Whether it's a grove or not, it was on. It was red.
Okay. Just put your mouth up next to it. Thank you.
Yes. For me, you know, that's the difference. I don't see the city motivated. I mean, we maintain our parks. I don't know. Is there any park that's designated a grove at this point in time? A tree grove?
I don't think so.
So, and we maintain those based on resources. If we have the resources, my sense is we'd be more apt to use them.
Yeah, I believe at this point in time we have exactly 2 heritage trees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Private property.
Yeah.
Going up
Because
the
this
city
just-
that haven't been approved. They're going up to the city next week.
Yeah, they're going up to the city next week, but that program has just started,
Yes.
basically,
Yeah.
end of last year.
We're still speaking strictly Waterboard Park, is that true at this time?
Trying to.
If you'd like to, or we
Okay.
can go wherever you'd like.
Well, I'd like to just comment. I was hoping Norm Stewart would be here tonight. Norm is older than I am, and he's pretty old. I'm old, all right? Am I going to commit the rest of my life to that ivy? No. Would I like to see people come together to commit to the restoration of that area? Well, first of all, it's in the state of movement. It's a geologically active area. And the point that I made at the workshop, which I hope we can all come to, be a part of it with Brian and I, is this area is a showcase of geologic processes in Oregon. Slumps, creeps, slides, It's a really neat place. Rocky Smith Jr. should be doing his Ghostbusters program. I'm serious. Because it's a real active area. And that's the part that makes it unique, in addition to the trees and everything. They're adjusting to the constant changes in topography. I mean, 8 years ago, it was different, the road. 2 years ago, the road was different. John knows this. And I was hoping, when I wrote a letter 3 years ago about this project called the Public Works Project, that somehow the Public Works Project could be a nucleus to make some things happen there, including the stewarding of, and in particular, the stewarding of Waterboard Park with trails and access ways and so forth. Now, I wish that Lori Griffith was here. She's not a member of this body. She's the volunteer coordinator for the city of West Lynn that oversees all the volunteers at Marius Young State Park. And I believe strongly in what they've done there because of the attitude that's been created there. Not that it hasn't been created here, but it's in evolution here. It hasn't proceeded as far as it has in West Lynn. So Norm's objective for the May 19th workshop, because he has control over the military property, I don't know how many acres that is, a couple acres I guess, is to have the military department there on May 19th. He's already talked to the general of the Army of the state, don't ask me who that is, to get permission to have the Army supply their tourism director, shall we say, the people that handle their museums and interpretive information about military processes. How am I saying this? You know, tanks and guns and what the military does, to talk to them about, and us, the public, about what could we do in that area to involve the military, assuming that Armory still stays there. Now, if the Armory is supposed to go, I'm not totally clear on that in your plan. That's another issue. But he already talked to them about a 36-inch diameter oak tree that's there. That's not a part of your deliberations because it can't be. It's on private property. And I know he has an interest in seeing that tree stewarded. So, you know, if we're not there now, I feel like, and I mentioned this to several people, this asset is misunderstood. It isn't even known. It's a north-facing environment. It's got all this active geology. The Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, I think, will show an interest in it. It could be our showcase natural area. I'm talking about Waterboard Park. Now, how it interfaces with Public Works is another issue. And it was my hope when I wrote a letter, which I have copies for our committee here, 3 years ago, that there was some way that this could happen in conjunction. And maybe it can't. I understand there's some traffic issues. But I feel like of all the areas in Oregon City, that area is probably the most unique asset, except for the 1,100 acres called Newell Creek Canyon, which is vast. So if we're not there yet, I think we could be moving that direction to do something to get a program in place for stewardship.
Just running through some of the pictures, so.
Yeah, I've been watching. I love that sign there. I think that's great.
I've got one question. Is there, I guess it seems like there's a couple ways to look at this. One thing is to look at both the Public Works site and the park site has one unit, or to look at each one on their own merits. And I'm just curious if there's any consensus, or because it seems like, you know, Public Works did bring up some issues they have at this time. And
I believe that the Heritage nomination covers the whole thing, if I'm not mistaken. But the city would prefer to break the two apart.
Just because we actually had we had more information on Public Works. I mean, we actually had a tree inventory. Mm-hmm. We actually had by species, by caliper, and we actually had that detailed report. So it was just an easier way to break out the discussion more than anything.
The tree survey also covered the Armory site as well.
It did cover the Armory, right, which is not part of the application.
There was a question asked earlier, do we have sufficient information? I think Tony asked that question. I feel like we have sufficient opportunities. How can we evolve them is a more interesting question. If we were to make a recommendation, I feel like we have to do some fact-finding, this group, and really look at it. I really don't like just being in a room like this and not experiencing the land out there. And I also like to know more about what Public Works objectives were on the site and how they would meet them, including not our issue, but the access issues. Because I have a lot of faith in what I've seen John Lewis do when I worked with him on cleanups, as one example, all right? So, but I feel like, Mr. Chairman, that we need to, I guess we have more input tonight from others?
Yeah,
Do
we have one more member of the
And
public
I
that
also
would
feel
like
like
to
that
speak.
we need to do some fact-finding,
Yeah,
like go
there's-
visit the site.
Yeah, there's a lot, having many times went to that park and looked at the main section of the park, there's an impressive collection of trees there, and most of the ground is, not all, but most of the ground is covered by ivy, and there's a heck of a lot going up the trees, which is, has been dealt with, by volunteers from time to time, and it's just, we need to focus those efforts so that you clear an area and go on to another area and so on. But, so the lack of inventory on that is of some concern, I would suppose. But I can say for sure that it should qualify for a grove in the sense that there's impressive trees in there. But they're also widely spaced, which is just the nature of things in Oregon in a mature or partially mature forest like that, where the trees are going to be 50 and more feet apart. It's just because the trees are more than that across at the crown. And in an older forest, they're not going to meet the 20-foot criteria. So I do think that needs to be amended at some point in time, probably sooner the better, because in a case like this, if you're going to go by that 20-foot measurement between trees, it's not going to work, because even though it's an obvious grove, it wouldn't qualify with that in place. So
I've got a question. What is the potential downside of postponing making a recommendation decision from tonight to have a chance to secure additional information, do site visits? I'm just wondering, understanding additional information seems it could help make a better informed decision or bring other issues up.
Well, the first question for me is there any deadlines here? I don't think the city is about to be embarking on development right away.
No. This isn't a land use designation
Right.
or a land use process, so there's no statutory decision timeline. In terms of the Public Works facility itself, they have an approved land use application for the master plan. The City Commission has directed the Public Works Director to look at alternative sites, which they're doing. So, yeah, we're not moving forward with any construction in the near future. And I guess I'm not sure who's next up to speak.
We have one more.
Mr. I don't know if Bill wanted to
Kathy
speak at all.
Roth.
Or,
Would I be pleased? Yeah, I'd be pleased to have you come up.
Kathy Roth, Oregon City. Good evening. Well, number one, I'd like to bring forward that this is not just an individual person bringing this heritage designation to you. This is a neighborhood and was approved by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, so it's not a single person, even though it is a single person's name on the application.
Good.
Secondly, you will never find a pristine site that's entirely clean of invasives. That's just not going to happen. We don't live in that environment anymore. Thirdly, this does not, designating this as heritage sites, and I'm talking about all the sites now, the city, Public Works, and the Waterboard Park, there does not obligate the city to any monetary obligation at this point or any point in the future that I can see. They're not required to do an inventory. They're not required to go in and do anything about the health of the trees unless it's a danger, which would be in a park anyway, it would be that way. So there is no monetary attachment to this. Thirdly, or fourthly, whatever I'm at. Jerry mentioned Norm Stewart and the volunteer group. I've been part of that group now for over a month. We've been going in there on Saturdays, and I'm sure you can, if you walk through, you can see probably better than a 2-acre swath right now that we have cut the ivy off the base of the trees. We've taken out blackberries. There's a significant improvement, and this group is only growing. We've been picking up people that are just walking through the park when we're working in there, and they come back the next Saturday. So the volunteer group is growing, and I think they're really making a significant improvement in the area. As far as the public works site, the trees, when we looked at the survey that was done, a lot of the trees were said to be unhealthy. But I think a lot of the health of those trees depends on what's going on around them. They've got heavy equipment moving on them constantly. They've got gravel being dumped on them. They've got heavy bricks and old concrete. I mean, those trees would significantly improve in health if they were left undisturbed and not rattled around by dump trucks and things like that all the time. And I guess that's all of my points. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, technically, we're supposed to get everybody to sign up ahead of time, but we're a little more informal than City Council itself. So, Bill Daniels, could you come on up?
Bill Daniels, a member of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and the signer on the application representing the association, the neighborhood, by a unanimous decision, wanted this application to go forward for consideration. I had the privilege of talking with Tony and Pete and Scott Archer yesterday about details of the application and my thoughts on it as one opinion. And I felt, and I made it clear to Pete that as well as Tony, that I think by declaring this area as a grove, a heritage grove, and heritage has different meanings for everybody, but certainly we all have a past or history, and heritage is part of our past or history, and current elements of that usually should be preserved if we have a choice in the matter. And I think, as Jerry might have mentioned before, that certainly is an unknown asset in this community. There's very few people, I don't know percentages, but a lot of people don't know about its existence. And I think once they've had a chance to be there, many of them, as Kathy just mentioned, do come back. And they want to be involved in preserving that area. And we're talking about Waterboard Park at this particular point of the meeting, and certainly my application, or the application through the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, was to preserve that entire bench up there, the tax lots that were included, with the exception, of course, the property that the city does not own, and that's the Armory property, the state's property, which incidentally has a heritage tree on there, a white oak that probably needs nomination as well. But there is a significant number of white oak in that grove. It isn't always about the caliper of the tree that indicates the health of the tree, and certainly it's the what that tree might be growing on, whether it's scabland, rock, poor drainage, but it's a survivor. And a tree that's smaller in diameter quite often can be older than a tree that's twice its size, simply because of the ability for a tree that doesn't have as many issues to deal with to grow seems to get larger quicker. That's a healthy group of Quercus garryana, a white oak up there, and certainly along with there's madrone up there, and I've talked to the staff about a large madrone that we're not sure where that boundary is on that tax lot, but there's also obviously the native species of the maple and the Doug fir, but it's more importantly that we're talking about a vanishing tree in the Willamette Valley, and that is the white oak. So I would like to see consideration given. I believe that if it's nominated and it's given that designation as a heritage grove, that I think that brings attention to the area, and that's the kind of thing that we need to get volunteers. Lots of times we all have, whether it's a product or whether it's a site or some sort, if you don't know about it, people won't come to participate or to buy if it's a product. But if they don't know about a good product, it's not going to sell. But I think that's the kind of thing that can be used to get volunteers to come and help preserve that area if we're talking about cleaning up the invasives. So I hope you do consider this nomination. I was not under the impression there was a timeline to make a decision either. I just want to bring the focus on this. The neighborhood wanted to bring a focus on this grove of trees, and as well as the public works area, so that if there was an opportunity to preserve it, we could start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you planning to talk about the public works side, or are you going?
Want us to roll through that real quick?
Sure.
I would. That'd be helpful.
I guess
Yes.
I guess the only thing I would say about the, and I'm not sure if I'm out of place talking about the park itself, but I have walked it recently, and I have seen a lot of the improvements that the volunteer group has made, and I couldn't help but wonder how much more could happen with a volunteer coordinator. I know previous employers, we had a natural resource staff person that was great about coordinating those kinds of things. And you know, removing ivy weekend after weekend is not an easy task to do. I was very impressed. If Norm has been heading that up, I need to run down there and congratulate him, because I thought it was pretty impressive effort there.
Yes, it is.
I'll tell you too, Norm has been hugely successful. The other one, Dan LaJoy, is up there almost every Saturday morning on his own.
Get you on the record.
So Dan LaJoy is up there every weekend as well. So, you know, I just think it's great. It did expose some things that I also saw, which Marlo, I think you kind of brought to the forefront. Is, you know, what I've seen is when you remove much of that ivy or dies down, you remove enough to that tree, you see what's left, which often isn't much. You know, the bark has been destroyed to the point where the tree kind of falls. It rots right at that point. And I saw signs of some of that already taking place, where you see these trees where they've split low, deep, right? And so one of the things that I was noticing was a lot of beautiful trees. The trees in there are really interesting too, because of the land movement. So you've got some trees going, you know, at this angle, and it's a different forest than I've ever really paid attention to. And you know, just seeing all that geologic movement, and the fact that you've got surviving Doug fir trees that are 60 feet tall, so I think it's an impressive piece of area as well. It's, I would say, significantly more impressive than the Public Works Operations site, so I'll get to that too. But it's an impressive site, and I think I don't get how the designation gathers people. My understanding is it's a park, and I'm not sure how we would not protect trees in that, whether it be designated as a grove or not. But if it's designated grove, it's a park. It's a place that, you know, maybe it will bring more resources. I think, you know, if that reaches out to some people, that would be great. And I can't speak for Scott Archer, but I definitely see that area being nice. It is a canopy. It's the coolest place in the summertime to hang out, because the shade is significant there, and you know, because of the exposed slopes, the ground soil is cooler, so the temperatures are cooler. So lots of observations about that piece of property that make it a special place, which is, again, I'll say it, much different than what I see on the Public Works site.
Well, and with the heritage designation, I think it's just a little bit more added protection. While something may be designated as a park, that could change in the future if development wanted, if people, you know, community wanted development or whatever. A heritage designation would just ensure that that's not going to happen, that it would continue to be a park. And really, my question in regards to, like earlier, was more specifically like with the, you mentioned, Pete, that it is in a natural state. If we did a nomination, would it maintain that the state it's in now is the natural state, or?
Yeah, the charter supersedes the code. So being identified in the charter as a natural park, which in terms of development encroachment would have to go to a vote of the people, whereas a heritage tree nomination can be given by the city commission and it can be rescinded by the city commission. So the actual charter affords much more protection than the heritage tree or grove designation would. And in our charter, it's very clear that we can't lease, sell, significant development in our designated parks, and there's several designated parks in there, of which Waterboard Park is one of those.
Yeah, the charter, the specific pages are page 114 and 115 of your packet. Section 41 of the charter says that the city may not sell, lease, or otherwise transfer park property, vacate or otherwise change legal status of any park, construct permanent buildings or structures thereon other than for recreational purposes and park maintenance, change the status of a natural park, construct buildings or clear vegetation except for the construction of trails and essential roads and elimination of habits that constituting a clear and present danger to the public. And then on page 115, there's section 44, it talks about maintenance in further detail. So there's certain types of maintenance that are permitted.
Yeah, and does that include removing ivy and invasives specifically?
Noxious weeds, it says, commission may require property owners to remove noxious weeds and plants.
There's actually a legal definition of that, and it doesn't include all invasives.
Right. So there's some
Including
interpretation.
some of the real bad ones, like I think ivy may be on that list finally in the last couple of years, but many other ones, like a certain fruit tree that is one of our worst invasives, is not on that list.
I would add, Marlo, that under the Heritage Tree Code section, under which is, where is that? Page 113 of your packet, section E, it talks about protection of heritage trees and groves, which states that no heritage tree or grove may be removed, topped, or otherwise altered unless permitted by this section. So some of the protections are obviously similar between the two sections. It states that a tree may be removed by the city if it constitutes a view obstruction. Routine pruning, leaf raking, and other maintenance activities is okay. And talks about what types of hazards might constitute grounds for removal.
And that's really my question, though, is if we were to designate it as a heritage grove, the ivy that's existent, like if it's not specifically stated that to remove that as an invasive, would it be best for us to remove the ivy first, then seek designation as a heritage grove, so that we're not infringing on any? Because I don't know the specifics of this, so that's what I'm trying to understand is.
Well, if there was anything in the law that would prevent removal of invasives, it probably should be changed. That's what I would say.
But I mean,
Yeah.
if the designating it as a heritage grove prohibits us from going in and removing invasives to create a healthier grove, would it not be best for us to wait on a heritage designation, remove the ivy, then go back and seek heritage designation? I just want it to clear, because I don't want it to be something like we designate it as heritage, then we find out that we can't go in and remove that invasive species because it's not allowed now that it's a heritage designation.
I don't think that prohibition is in there.
Okay.
You could go in and take out invasives, maintaining the health of the tree.
If you would define it noxious weed in the broad sense rather than the legal sense, then that would do the job.
More discretion.
Yeah.
Tony, I have a question. The master plan that we developed for the operations yard, assuming we weren't successful at finding another piece of property, and this was determined to be the property that we were going to redevelop, one of the conditions was that we create a connectivity pathway from what would be really the Center Street side, where John Adams intersects with Center Street, into Waterboard Park onto the old roadway. So the idea was we would have to close John Adams Street to keep a secure yard, and in doing so we would eliminate what now happens, which is people walk through John Adams Street and then go up the park entrance. So if we close those, the condition was made that when we developed, we would build a pathway to connect the pathway, or connect the public off of Center Street to the pathway. And just knowing that area, my sense was in order to do that, there would be some tree removals. My guess is it might as well be a soft path because it's really not ADA accessible, but we never have gotten to that level of detail. So I don't exactly know how that would play out, but that would be another concern that I would have, because again, we don't have a site, or we do have a site, but we don't have a new site yet. So that's one of our concerns, is placing these conditions on a piece of property that's yet to be kind of really confirmed as no longer a need, is, at least for a public works yard, is concerning for us.
Do we have the graphics that you provided me in my mailing?
Yeah, what page is that, Jerry?
That's page 82 of 126, 82. That's the proposed site plan. You might want to compare that with page 39 of 126.
It may not show. I don't remember if that shows a pathway. Does
It's in the very last part of this packet here, so let me see if I can't pull that up.
Some of you might, yeah.
Not sure if it ever made it onto an actual.
I think you can probably see the location you're talking about.
There it is. It's showing. See that?
Right.
See that trail pathway?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there was nothing specific there. It was shown schematically. But.
Okay, so it's conceptual, kind of.
Well, page 82 is your conceptual buffering and use of yards and so forth, and I was struck, I hadn't really looked at this until 3 days ago. The Armory still stays, correct?
Yes.
And a former building, it used to be a cannery or something, is that true?
No.
Whatever it was.
No, all the existing public works buildings would go away.
Okay.
In the plan.
But they're almost the same. I'm just comparing, if our committee has page 80,
Right.
39.
The new buildings are aligned similarly. But
Everything's aligned the same way.
it's new.
And I'm not saying an advocate for public works being at this location. I'm saying I was struck because I didn't realize that the 4-story building is actually on Center Street. Is that true? It goes up the bluff line, across over the causeway.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, fundamental to all this to me was, I don't live in this area, but is how in the world, how would you make adjustments on access? Can you make access primarily in and out of Center Street? Was that your intention?
Right.
Improve Center Street? And never use John Adams again?
No. Access off Center Street. You mean for the upper yard? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
To get to the upper yard.
You're already using
Right.
Center Street. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
So
you.
there's parking access off Center Street,
All right.
but the original John Adams Center Street intersection would not change much. It would be one-way traffic that would be through the site and out onto John Adams. So that was the proposal.
Yeah. And we for those of us that did walk through, we did notice how the connection to Center Street is really difficult right now, but you guys are capable of anything, seems to me.
Again, we determined we weren't going to make much in the way of change right there, though.
Right, okay.
Jerry.
Anyway, I feel like we should explore the site. That's what I feel like we should do with a community that cares about it, and before we make a decision. I don't know what the rest of the committee feels.
Yeah, I think that looking at the site would be important. Do we have any restrictions on doing that legally as a group?
This isn't it's not a land use decision. We're just asking for your input and your recommendations. So this isn't a public hearing.
So we could set up a date and.
You don't have ex parte conflicts or biases or anything like that.
Okay.
I think Nancy Hyde always says, you know, if you want to be absolutely sure, we'll give a week's notice and put an agenda item out that there will be a site visit by the Natural Resources Committee, and that way the public knows about it.
Yeah. If we're all going to go together, or if we're going to facilitate something, we would we'd still notice it as a public that you're getting together. If you're going to do it on your own, you can certainly do that. That would be separate.
I'd just like to put it on record that without having to visit the site again, I would be comfortable with putting this forward for nomination, having previously been at the site and knowing that area, since I live right there, I live right off of Waterboard, so.
I guess I have a question. If we went ahead with a nomination tonight, what is the committee's responsibility or whatever beyond, approving the nomination? I mean, it seems like it's a really big thing. There's a lot of different issues going on, and I'm just kind of curious, what our roles would be beyond the nomination if it was approved tonight.
So we would take, we've got a couple options. Obviously, we have the minutes tonight. We can try and have a little bit more dialogue. Then we would then bring forward to the city commission while they're making their decision. We could try and write something up and bring it back for you to do a little bit more formal of a recommendation. I mean, we've got a lot of latitude here on how we proceed. Our goal was to try and get some input from the Natural Resources Committee on groves, trees, as they relate to this site, and what your expertise and opinions were on the proposal, and if you had enough information, and if it was appropriate, and that's what we were looking for.
I think there maybe also be opportunities to begin exploring kind of like resource needs or opportunities or options, because it seems like resources are a constraint for optimal management of the resources.
Marlon, were you talking about the whole site as applied for, or are you talking about the Waterboard Park site?
The whole site is applied.
And as always, your decision making is by consensus in this case. Yeah.
Would you want to make a formal motion on that?
Well, you guys, it seems as though you want to go visit the site. I'm just letting you know that without needing to visit the site, I would be fine at this point. But I would be okay with you guys needing more information. I'm just putting on record that I feel I have enough information to make that decision.
Okay.
And the reason I'd like to have people see the site is that the plant material is one issue. The geology is very significant too, and I believe there's ways to steward that in a properly designed project. And I also believe that dictates the type of plant material and how it's growing there, that it is indigenous to that zone because of the glacial age floods that scoured it and things like that. So I think us understanding that better might be helpful too. And I also think this is the one chance we have to really generate some interest from the public in that area. And I think we can do that.
And I agree with generating the interest, and that's part of my motivation in agreeing with putting it for nomination is knowing that area needs more notice by communities outside of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. So knowing the geological things, I think, in my opinion, that would be a conversation to have afterwards, after the nomination progresses, and like how we can, and it would be something outside of the nomination for Heritage Grove. But if it's something that needs to happen in order for us to fully consider this, then I'm fine with that happening.
Can I, since we really haven't talked about the operations yard, and it sounds like you might be going there, I just want to make sure I have an opportunity to say we're excited about the idea of finding a secondary location. We seem to be getting support from City Commission on that. we haven't found it yet. And there's not a lot of sites to choose from that really meet our need in terms of location and area and cost. That we haven't found that yet. So that just kind of leaves, as someone who's responsible for managing a piece of property, that we may, hopefully not, but we may need to use in the future. Adding a condition like this changes that plan, because the trees that you're talking about are in an area that are that were designated for storage and vehicle parking. So, and if you designate the whole site, I mean, there's a lot of the site that we were planning to preserve anyway with our plan, but the whole site changes significantly. Definitely the rock outcrop. That was we made that point very clear in the discussions we had about the master plan, was needing that area where the rock outcrop was fairly critical. It would change if we were to develop without that rock outcrop, and on that site it would really change how we operate. We would probably have to split our operations into 2 yards. So one here and maybe one somewhere else. And that just really takes the efficiencies out. So as a property owner, which the city is, making that decision without having secured a site is concerning. And I get that the neighborhood has been strong on this issue about us not wanting to be there, but we're there. We've been there for a long time. Until we can secure the location, secure the funding for a new building, we're uncomfortable with this kind of designation as from Public Works. I'm speaking on behalf of Public Works. So I just think that's important to make sure we've stated. We think we said it in the letter, and Nancy stated that in the letter, but I think she asked me to be here just to emphasize that as well.
What is the city's process? Like the yard is relocated. How does future management of that site, after things are relocated, come about? Or, I'm just trying to figure out long term in regards to that site management. What is?
It's a discussion that hasn't been had yet.
Oh, okay.
If Public Works is successful in finding another location, acquiring it, making the move, what happens to this site once they vacate it?
Yeah.
We haven't. There's no decision on that yet.
Who would make that decision?
City Commission.
And I don't even know if I need to make the distinction, but the part of my leaning towards the entire site is, granted, that where I live sits directly on that access street, knowing that my mother pulls out, backwards onto that street, and it does influence where, how I see this needing, but as well as knowing natural resources, necessities, and things like that. So if that needs to be stated, that needs to be stated, but that does have an effect on how I view this. So
yeah, so I get that. I don't know how that affects the process.
Ryan, may I say something?
Yes.
And I don't know how to say this as
Come up.
me or as a commissioner.
Well, it depends on what hat you want to wear, I guess.
Okay. I'm not doing this to be argumentative. Kathy Roth, Oregon City. But we have made it extremely clear as one of our goals on the commission that Public Works will not be cited there. And Nancy has acknowledged that. She's told me herself very loud and clear, Public Works will not be going there. We've given leeway as far as finding another site, as far as funding another site. This is not practical. It doesn't belong in a neighborhood. So I know that they're frightened of not having another site. I can understand that. But as a commission, we've said this won't happen. I just think you should.
Okay, that's important information. Thank you.
So we're looking for a recommendation based on your expertise and your thoughts on the natural resource condition. You know, concerning the policy of being here or not being here, really, that, you know, I don't want you guys to get bogged down in that. It's, you know, I'd like, you know, it's an existing site. We're trying to move out, but, you know, we really want to focus on the trees, and, you know, does it make sense? You know, in that we'll let the city commission, who gets paid a lot of money to make those policy decisions, make that call. You know, so don't worry so much about that.
Just to make overall comments on what is there and present and what those values are. Some of the values may not fully meet or be involved with a heritage tree nomination. Mm-hmm. You know, the stuff along the edge of the bluff is a remnant piece of a very rare habitat, which is scabland habitat like they have over at Mary S. Young Park, you know, with oak trees that'll never reach full size, licorice fern growing on the ground, things that like Camassia, and which gives it some value, but it is, I have to agree, it's a fragmented section, but it still is a section. The rest of the park is, as far as trees, has a very nice, somewhat mature forest. And, and the trees, of course, as in any natural forest, are in a variety of conditions, some very healthy and some not. And it does form, an obvious grove visually. If you look at it in Google Earth, I'm sure you'll see one mass of trees, with a variety of species. And like many urban sites, it is degraded with invasives and the impacts of, human use. And the question in the back of your mind has to be is, what did that place look like originally? We'll probably never know at this point. But you could imagine a continuum of going to more and more soil as you head up the hill. But, right now, there's no question of, no matter what the legal status of that property, of building there, because the ground's moving actively. And I believe that started back in probably 96. And has been continuing ever since. And there's places where during that period of time there's 6 feet of movement vertically, and other areas where sideways movement is lifted up the pavement and so on. You probably noticed that. Anybody that's been up there has noticed that. The road is just being warped, and so that it's in multiple ways the main park is protected. There's never going to be development there, because it's just too unstable physically. You'd be an idiot to build there, because the ground's moving. But at the same time, there's some really nice examples of specific types of trees there. And with enough volunteer effort, that park could be cleaned up over time. And, the ivy problems greatly lessened or eventually removed.
Right.
But rarity isn't, addressed in the heritage nomination process, but it is significant there.
Nor is structure, Mr. Chairman, the structure of the ecosystem elements that are there.
Right.
And
the fact that, scabland oaks can be very small and very old at the same time is something that isn't taken into account at all, and we have a case with that sort of stuff there. Most of the land on the north edge and along that rim are in that category, at least to some degree. So there's a combination of things to look at, and when the just like the ordinance isn't 100% clear on removing invasives, but we're going to anyway, we know that.
Well, and Tony's earlier questions about what constitutes a grove, what doesn't, what should. Right. You were talking about the spacing. Part of my thinking is there's a lot of dead material in there, which is really valuable for wildlife habitat.
Right.
And, of course, the ordinance doesn't talk about that. So my reason for focusing in Park Marlow on the geology is the geology sets the stage for why that place is so interesting. and why the vegetation is the way it is. So I still feel like we as a group, everybody here in the audience for that matter, ought to be going on a tour of that place in conjunction with making a decision. I don't know how we can do that without seeing it. And if you're aware of the scour areas that we've analyzed and looked at, most people aren't. They're really unique. And on top of them is this little forest of miniature oaks that if somebody increment bored them to determine their age, would probably find out they're quite old in some cases. So, anyway.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that we put this on hold and making a decision until we can visit the site.
I second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, in the spirit of consensus, I'll consider that approved. And we'll
Can I make
continue this.
one addition?
Sure.
I think it may be helpful. I think there is no replacement for kind of ground truthing and visiting the site, but not all the members of the committee are here tonight, and it may be more viable to actually have a tour of the site, maybe even an early weeknight, just because a lot of people have commitments sometimes during the weekend, and try to optimize everybody's availability to participate in the tour. And you might even get some more members of the public who'd be willing to give up a weeknight early evening, as opposed to some people get pretty busy during the weekends.
Okay, could we just say then a tour that constitutes a quorum in that way?
Yeah.
Right.
Good deal. Well, again, the next thing that we're doing there is on May 19th, and I'm an extremely biased person. You know that about down woody material. You can tell that already. So, but this man is not, and he was the co-leader, and that is set for 9 until 11 on Saturday, May 19th. So the community at large could be a part of that, unless we want to do something ahead of that time. So.
Well, what I'm thinking, though, is a tour that the Natural Resource Committee members are on. We could maybe having such staff participation, be able to ask some different kind of questions or things. I'm just trying to say kind of one focus towards our orientation.
Yeah, if people aren't able to make the one, we could provide others at different times.
Sure.
I think what we'll do is we'll try and coordinate a time where we can get preferably all the Natural Resource Committee members, and we'll propose a couple times, and then go from there. It would most likely be during the weekday after work type of.
It would be nice if we get maybe a representative from the volunteers who've been working on the site with invasive removal to participate, or kind of update and inform us on what they've been doing as well. And it'd be nice if we represent
And the applicant too. I would
Yes.
think, so.
Everybody.
Okay.
We'll do our best to try and accommodate.
Weather permitting.
Just to be official here, any more discussion on the amended motion? Any objections? Then we'll go ahead and accept that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay, our next is future agenda items discussion. We just did some of that. By continuing this.
Well, Mr. Chairman, can I comment on the workshops briefly? Real
Yes.
briefly? Okay, because that has to do with the future planning that we do. The first workshop that we had planned, Conservation in America, which was featuring Professor Hal Swassey, he would like to wait until the fall. Dan Fowler has given us the use of the Abernathy Center for this purpose, which is wonderful. It's a beautiful conference center. And the intention was this is not just a heavy-duty discussion on conservation. It's perhaps a wine tasting. Seriously, something to get the public kind of involved, have fun, and hear from this professor. And interestingly enough, Dan Fowler has been reviewing a book about Teddy Roosevelt. Now, Roosevelt was here in the 1900s before he died many times, and visited a house on the Willamette River, the Finley Place. There's a Finley Wildlife Refuge. You might have heard of it down in Corvallis, 5,000 acres. That's pretty good size. And Mr. Finley and Mr. Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, would go canoeing and kayaking on the river and discussing and writing and photographing about the wildlife they saw. Well, Dan, studying Teddy Roosevelt, is really excited about this. So, I mean, that could be a great venue. And my suggestion would be before before Thanksgiving, maybe September, October. But I was trying to put this together for June, and it's not going to be possible. So, then the other two had to do with ecosystem services. Ian from the Saltwater Conservation Service, she works with Mr. Carr, whose first name is?
Eric.
Eric, I'm sorry. Thank you. And she's willing to help us with that at a future date. This is probably looking at, to be honest with you, the beginning of next year or something for that workshop. And then the third one that we were looking at was who regulates what. I know you'd all love this. Chance to have, this is my dream, to have the Attorney General, well, he's not running for Attorney General anymore, but talk about the business of who has authority over what in the state and what are the regulatory requirements that have to be farmed out to each agency. And I think we had a title for that, the
Ecosystem services?
something roundtable.
Oh, the agency roundtable.
Agency roundtable. Agency roundup and roundtable, because I think people don't know what to do, what agencies do what. And that probably would be if we were to do it later next year. So
Yeah.
we're out of ways, but I'd rather plan well than execute poorly. But the first one could be really good. And so I'm going to come back with a date for you in September, October for Professor Hal Swassey. He's, just for one more time to let you know, he's in charge of the oceanography, forestry, and all the divisions at Oregon State University in the so-called sustainability section that they formed. And he's an expert on this subject and who led the conservation movement in this nation of ours. And I thought that'd be a really neat thing for us to share with the public. And of course, we'd like to have a...
And that would potentially be with the Abernethy Center?
That would be at the Abernethy Center.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So, thank you.
I've got two items, potential future agenda items. The one thing I think came up again tonight had to do with mitigation, and I think it could be helpful for committee members to actually get kind of like a presentation on mitigation, what it is, what it isn't, when it applies. But I think too,
For tree removal?
well, I think more kind of a principle too, because I'm aware in cases where mitigation's taken place, but there hasn't been ongoing maintenance of mitigated trees or monitoring to make sure that you have an adequate survival rate to eventually get the anticipated benefits.
So wetland mitigation?
Well, I think it's more kind of mitigation as applies, within the city. Has it? Are there any potential changes we might want to assess or evaluate or make recommendations on?
Yeah, at our last meeting, we didn't get to that because we ran over time, I think.
Right.
17, the code under the, we have mitigation requirements under the tree protection part of the code, and we also have mitigation standards under the natural resource overlay district part of the code.
I think I'm more kind of interested in possibly exploring and discussing practical applications and shortcomings.
Okay.
The mitigate, we can have stuff on paper, but that's what's really happening out in the field.
Right.
So, that was one request, a potential topic in the future, and the other one had to deal with maybe potentially the committee's role in providing leadership or exploring how to help maybe promote consideration of urban forester position, maybe by alternative means, or try to. It seems like heck, if it doesn't start here, where's it going to start?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
You had asked a question earlier, and I didn't mean to not answer it. It's a complicated one in terms of how do we facilitate volunteerism on in the parks, and what can the city offer, and how do you bring resource? And it's a hard question, 'cause I know this sounds horrible, but it comes down to money and staff. From I've got a budget that my commission's adopted that I get to use, and somehow that discussion of how much can we do, a lot of it is, we're just going out and we're really pushing the limits of what staff can provide to try and provide just some minimal opportunities, but like a real robust program is a big commitment. And so, how that, I'm just trying to think, I was trying to think about how does that happen? It's like, I don't want to be in a position where, you heard tonight, there's some frustration that it was, that the Natural Resource Committees was ignored before. And I don't want to be in a position where, I don't want you to feel like what you're bringing forward is being ignored. I think it will always be considered. I just think that sometimes there are other considerations that go into it that may not make them feasible at this time. And
I think part of maybe what we could explore too in supporting is alternative means of getting to similar ends. It's one thing to put a full-time staff equivalent with benefits in the salary for a new position if you're struggling to maintain current things, but when you start exploring options like the AmeriCorps individual placements, internships, the RARE program, there's a variety of ways to provide support and coordination of volunteers and do things that aren't necessarily conventional city staff positions.
Yeah, we've had AmeriCorps volunteers in other departments before. I think we even had a RARE volunteer help out on the disaster preparedness update, but that was not through planning, that was through public engineering. And there was a sort of a matching grant that goes on for RARE. It's a great program. I'm really familiar with it because I went to UO and I knew a lot of the coordinators of that program. But it does require matching grant, or a matching amount of money on the part of the city to support that volunteer.
But I guess what I'm saying is some of these things could have significantly less of a budgetary impact than a full record time staff person.
Yep.
I believe from a public forum, when I was out there, I suggested that we enlist the help of Ken Wooster from Westland and come in and speak to us, and I'd like to suggest that for an immediate, real soon opportunity, because we're trying to figure out how the community can relate to the volunteer opportunities, or if they're even possible, and they've got it down to science there. And the other person would be Lori Griffith, that our chairman and I work with on another group called the Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force. She's a master at working with volunteers, and she's a volunteer coordinator. So one's paid staff for the City of Oregon's Westland Parks and Rec Director, and I think if you'd allow me with Pete to explore that, a date with him, we would get a lot out of that. It would help shape what you're talking about, Randy. How do we integrate these volunteers based on history of how others have made it work?
By all means.
So,
yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I've got all those listed. Any others?
Are we going to hear back from you on the overview of ORS 17.49? How that works?
I've got that. Do you want to hear that at the next thing, and then I can provide
That's
a summary of
resource
that?
overlay.
Just gotta be careful. We're not sure what we're going to be doing.
Pardon?
Or this may be coming back.
Oh, this is coming back on.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, this subsequent meeting.
Yeah, I think I think we understand that you want to review it. I think if we just have some latitude in managing the agenda a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want to put too much on there.
Sure.
Yeah, our agendas have been getting very large.
Right.
And we don't always get it all done.
We can't anticipate what we get in between now and then.
Not easy to save the world.
It's the environment. Come on.
Yeah.
But I think we understand that you want, and if this isn't coming back, I think this might have a little more discussion next time too.
That's true.
Depending on how quickly we can get the tour done and get it back to you guys. So we understand, and we'll get it to you as quick as we can, trying to manage your time as well.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. I think that's about it.
Well, thanks.
So moved.
Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, I declare us adjourned.
Out of town on May 19th. I got a niece
Thank
and
you.
nephew graduating the same weekend. And stuff like that.